points, really. I think I put 10 in the syllabus if you like redo it and I like it, but maybe I put more. I have to figure out a number that's logical and, you know, is justifiable. So I don't really know what that's going to be yet, but it probably would be really worth it if you do that. And a lot of people should get their paper in the next 5 days, I would assume, but I'm not really paying any attention to what course it is, right? So it just, you know, gets distributed around. So fine, if I was talking about Dunkirk and I, you know, explained what happened there, did I talk about the air war over Britain, where they thought that they were going to lose? Because I don't remember the air war. I mean, oh, you recorded me lecturing? I should get those. No,
yeah, it's not
really.
particularly
Why
loud.
would I want them?
Yeah, it's not particularly loud.
So what's the last thing? Is it Dunkirk?
But you have a map up here about German expansion.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I can just go from here. Okay, you know, trying to reduce down World War II, right, to one lecture session. That is a couple lecture sessions.
On the whiteboard to the side, yeah, like Dunkirk, like force, German occupation, traffic logistics. That's all.
Oh, right. That was That was all associated, right? It was the logistical issues that they had to overcome in order to invade France, and they were able to basically pull it off. And the French didn't think that was possible. So the French were taken totally by surprise, as was the British, right? And they had to get the hell out of there, or they were going to just get swept up in like a bag from the Germans. And so what they do is organize the greatest evacuation that has ever occurred in history, where they were able to bring in about 500,000 guys, mostly British, some French, back to Britain in the space of, I don't know what it was, 10 days, something like that. 500,000 men. And they didn't have the ships for that, so they had to go along the coast in Britain and ask people who had anything that was relatively large if they'd, you know, be willing to help out. And if you saw the movie Dunkirk, you're taking a risk, man, you know, as you go towards the coast, because the Germans are bombing away at ships. And they could do that by plane, or if you get close enough to the shore, they could also bomb you to oblivion. So, nevertheless, a lot of people did it and helped save all those lives. They saw it as their like patriotic duty or whatever. And you know, if Britain had no troops, then they might suffer a lot more on the hands of the Germans. When you're evacuating people and you know you're not going to bring them all back, okay? The people are going to be more valuable, presumably, than the weaponry. And the weapons, they just take up so much room and so on that you couldn't bring back that many anyway in a short period of time. So the British have to leave tens of thousands of pieces of expensive equipment, tens of thousands, everything that they had virtually. Everything they had virtually, tanks and so on, in France for the Germans to take. And I don't know, did they destroy a lot of that stuff before the Germans got there? I would think they would. You know, that would make sense, but I haven't read that. Actually, and I've read a lot about this, so that's bizarre. Did they destroy their weaponry before they took off? In order for the Germans not to be able to make use of it. So, not sure. But in any event, what happens then is that Britain is defenseless, okay? Except it's got what? What forms of military protection?
Navy.
They have a navy and
Air Force.
right, the Royal Air Force. Okay? And so what that means is that they are going to attempt to keep the Germans from invading basically by use of really more than anything their Air Force, because what if the Germans parachute troops in? Okay, Germany at that point, the U.S. now was better. No, at that point, the Germans were better in paratroopers than the Allies were. So that would be a big worry. And obviously, in terms of ships, then it would also be, the Royal Navy could try to keep German troop transports from coming across. But of course, there's only 20 miles between Britain and France, okay? Which is not a lot at its shortest point. People have swum it, or swammed it, or swimmed it, right? People have, swum it, or something. Swammed it.
See, this is why you can't be a grammar Nazi.
Oh, you just looked at your paper? What? I didn't do anything on grammar.
Oh, no, I haven't actually.
Oh.
Did you get my papers back to us?
I don't know. I got through her paper from this class. And I think other stuff, but not finished with anything else.
I better not have any grammar mistakes, otherwise I wasted sissy dolls of Grammarly.
Well, Brett, Grammarly can help you guys with that kind of stuff. It can't really help you with composition. It's not going to say, oh, your title doesn't really indicate what your thesis is. But Grammarly can tell you that, you got the wrong form of there, or something like that.
Or I'm using stuff in a passive voice.
I might correct on your paper passive voice to put it active voice, because active voice is very usually preferable. But I am very aware that most people don't know what the hell I'm talking about with active voice, passive voice, and it's a little bit hard to explain.
It's like he was loved, or he loved, or something like that.
Well, right. In active voice, it is who's doing the thing, and what's the thing they're doing. That goes up front, not in the back. Okay, and usually when you're putting it in the back, the verb's usually towards the back, and often the word like buy is in the back, right? My my paper was graded by Dr. Gillette. That's passive. Active, Dr. Gillette graded my paper. Shorter and more direct. See, but it takes some practice to get it. So everybody's worried then in Britain that the Germans are going to invade. They should have been worried, and I do mean everybody. I mean Churchill, the King, everybody on down. And obviously, they refused to leave the country, and if the Germans did land, they'd be hunting for them, right? John?
Didn't the previous prime minister try to do like negotiation talks with Malik?
Yeah, that was Chamberlain. He did, and Chamberlain was Chamberlain dead yet? No, he was still alive. He would die pretty soon after that from natural causes. They would have gotten him too, So you're a target if you're anybody who is politically active and has in any way really criticized the Germans, which would have been everybody. So, and remember, Britain is basically defenseless. They have like 4 major pieces of artillery. And they left like thousands in France. And they have like 4 in Britain. It is utter disaster. And so they train people real quickly as saboteurs. If the Germans do land, they change street signs. They teach people how to booby trap their cars, because people knew the Germans would take the cars. You know, they really need motor transport, and they probably won't have it when they come across. It was desperate situation like you can't imagine. In the end, it didn't come to that. And the reason it didn't come to that was because the pilots of the Royal Air Force were willing to sacrifice their lives. Because basically, if you were in the fighting in the Royal Air Force at that point, you're not going to live. Okay, you won't survive the war. And unless you become a POW, or, I mean, if you get seriously wounded, I guess, but that's probably not very common on a plane. I guess it happens. Basically, it's a death sentence. And these guys knew it. So that's heroism. The idea was they'd sacrifice their lives to save their country, right? It's so much that we could talk about in that sense, but, time limits, right? So it wasn't just the Royal Air Force that saved Britain, it also was the radar. They had more advanced radar than anybody else. Didn't I tell you that they tried to develop a death ray and they wound up with radar? I don't know if I told you that, but I tell these different classes. But yeah, radar was extremely important because from what direction, at what speed, at what height, and what number of planes are coming towards you, which means you got the chance to bring your pilots up to meet them, right? And so there were planes that were allocated at points all along the coast. I mean, you don't just fly around fighter planes. That wasn't the deal. What the deal was is you wanted to get those guys up as quick as possible, have them do their thing, and land as quick as possible, because you're using up gas supplies that you can't afford to use up. And, risking the plane, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess most people think, these Royal Air Force guys are flying around all day long. And it's like, no, I mean, they get in, get up, maybe it takes them 15, 20 minutes, do a fight, half an hour, whatever, back down. But still, they are going to, at each point, risk their lives tremendously, as I suggested. And it becomes pretty obvious to Hitler that he's not going to be able to take Britain under those circumstances. Okay, Germans had radar, but I don't know much about radar. It wasn't very good. And so Britain was at a great advantage with that, okay? With the technology that's going to matter, Britain was way ahead. With the technology that's not going to matter, Germany was way ahead. Okay, ballistic missiles were great, were wonderful. What was the best thing ballistic missiles that were invented by Wernher von Braun were able to do? Yeah, but I mean, in the end, what purpose did they really actually achieve?
Intimidation?
John?
Oh, no, I was going to say, didn't they do intercontinental missiles or something like that?
Actually,
They did, but none of were ever launched. The best thing that ever happened from Wernher von Braun's ballistic missiles is we landed men on the moon.
Yeah. I said that last time.
That's the deal, because they had all this, military cool technology in the 50s, but it never was used. Okay. The Soviet Union got their hands on some engineers and were able to also build rockets, but the real best engineers we got, and they continued their experimentation and so on.
I mean, we put a man on the moon, but won't they'd have a first guy in space at all, right? The first man in space was from Russia, right?
Yes, Yuri Gagarin.
Yes, the earth is blue, very blue.
So yeah, people know his name. I'm not sure why. But the first was a dog, actually.
Yep.
I don't know the name of the dog.
I want to say it was Yuri. Was it Yuri?
No, that's Yuri Gregorian. Gregorian. Maybe it was just, puppy. I don't know. It's probably Russian though. So there you go with the fancy technology stuff.
Linka.
Linka?
Yeah, Lika.
What's it mean? Lika?
L-A.
Leica.
Yeah, L-A-I.
Oh, it sounds like just a name.
Yeah.
But so you know that's important. Hitler wasted a lot of money, enormous amount of money and labor on fancy weapons that were not going to change the war because there were so few of them actually built. Because usually they weren't ready until late in the war. And by then, it was too late for Germany to really change the course of the war with those things. Had they had them in the beginning, things might have been different. Because, the Messerschmitt jets ran circles around, gas-powered, regular old fighter planes or whatever. Right? They would be unbeatable practically. So, Hitler now is thinking, well, the only country left that I'm at war with is Britain. And Britain refuses to give up and make a deal with me. I don't really want to land in Britain. I don't really want to take Britain. The only thing I, Hitler, want from you, Britain, is for you to promise you will never attempt to invade Europe again. Okay, or, bomb us, or, right. Never attack us again and never attempt to land in Europe again, an army. That kind of stuff. Otherwise, we're not interested in you. You can go have your empire and do whatever. And very likely Hitler was serious about it. I mean, everything he said, to everybody that he said it to indicated that that was the deal. He wanted the East. He wanted Ukraine, all right? He didn't want London or those places. So that's basically what's going to happen. If Hitler decides, well, I can't take Britain, it's too difficult at this point, so I can't stop the war, I guess it's time to move on to what I really want to do. And what I really want to do is invade the Soviet Union and conquer and take a territory that I can then Germanize and essentially add to Germany.
And use it for farmland, right?
Yeah, farmland, but they were also going to build cities and stuff. I mean, Germans love to prepare. They're very good at preparation. So they were already designing roads and stuff. Already designing roads from Berlin to Kiev. Believe it or not. They never built them. So Hitler had every reason to believe that the Soviet army was in horrendous shape as it was. Okay, Stalin had incredibly stupidly killed, imprisoned, or sent to labor camps most of the high-level military officers in the Soviet army because he always was afraid they might attempt to overthrow him. In the end, who runs the government is going to be the people with the guns. Okay? And the army was the people with the guns. So he destroyed the very foundation of the leadership for his army, 4 years before he was attacked by Germany. And that's not a long time to get these guys up in rank and trained in everything. And he allowed the army to, it was then run by like old guys that he had known from his youth, fighting in the revolution. And these guys, like tanks, what do we need with tanks? I mean, seriously. So the army was like semi-prepared for World War I, okay? And Hitler knew it. He knew it because they had fought a little war with Finland the Soviets, and they won, but they only won because they threw massive numbers of bodies at the little Finns. It's a small population. Otherwise, they did horribly.
Well, isn't the winter war very similar to what's happening in Ukraine right now?
Oh, I'm gonna kill you guys. You always get my cool observations before I get to it. What do we know Finland is likely gonna do in the next few months? Join NATO. Why? Because they're scared the Soviets or the Russians will try it again. Okay, which by the way will like double or more the border between NATO and Russia. You know, which remember, all he's got to do is attack NATO, and we are at war with the first or second largest military in the world. I think second largest. And what happened in Transnistria the other day?
Oh, the false flag attack? Moldavia?
Yeah, Transnistria is an area of Moldova that is populated primarily by Russians because of weird stuff, I guess. It doesn't really make sense. And the Russian government has stated they want that back. Okay, they haven't had it since the Soviet Union. And there were blasts there a few days ago. And it's worried, the government's worried that it was purposeful provocation by the Russians to invade that area, and that would give them a huge advantage over Ukraine.
It's on the maps as part of them.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. If that happens, and you were head of Moldova, that is Moldova.
Yeah, poorest country in Europe.
Yeah, but listen, okay, now Russia has invaded Moldova. And if they take that, what the hell is to stop them from taking the whole place? It used to be Russian. So I haven't read people getting this idea anywhere. But what you would do is plead for immediate annexation by Romania, because they both speak Romanian, and it was part of Romania for most of its history. So that's what you would do. I would, right? And other than be utterly destroyed, I'd say, Romania,
Romania doesn't want that.
We've talked about it before. Take us on. Well, if Romania did that and annexed them, then that area is covered by NATO, because Romania is covered by NATO. Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay, so y'all need to be worried. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, because it's like every week there's something else that happens, isn't there? That is very scary. So don't think this just goes away because you may not hear about it from day to day. They keep talking more and more about it's going to last for years, probably. Big wars last for a couple of years, right? And if that happens, it's more and more likely Russia will strike NATO out of desperation because they can't keep it up, but we can. I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, going back to the history of it all. So what Hitler decides to do at this point, and we're talking about 1941, is to invade the Soviet Union. He figures their army is pitiful, although massive. He knows that there's a lot of people that don't like Stalin. Okay. And he figures he'll be able to overthrow Stalin and the communists very quickly and take whatever the hell he wants. And he was, so that happens in 41, all right? The German invasion of the Soviet Union. Okay. So, it went exactly according to plan, more or less. They were able to move much more quickly than they are now in Ukraine. I mean, vastly more quickly. Okay, after this point in time, the war's been going on, what, for over 2 months? They must have been like, they were several, like 200, 300 miles into the Soviet Union at that point, not like 30 or 40, 10 times further than what we see today with the Russians. Okay, but what happens? Well, one, again, as you see in Ukraine, people are willing to fight and die for their homes and their loved ones and stuff, a lot more than they are just to invade somebody. So the Russians will wind up fighting for the death. And if not, they have KGB troops behind you with machine guns if you decide to go the wrong direction and get lost. Do you see what I'm saying? You got no choice. And so that's extremely important. Stalin emphasizing fighting for, your lives in our country and all of that. He knows nobody's going to fight for communism, but they'll fight for their homeland. So he kind of stops talking about communism and all of that and starts talking more about the homeland. This is like the beginning of the reversion in various ways of Russia back to its like pre-communist nationalist ideology. I hate to kind of say that because it's like, well, after Stalin, didn't they really, after the war, didn't they really go back to communism? They did, but they retained a lot of the nationalism that revived in World War II, and eventually, as you know, communism collapsed entirely. That whole system is long gone. And Putin, in fact, was criticizing Lenin a couple months ago for having created the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, on TV. So there is no love lost between the current government and that former government. It is, entirely nationalist at this point. So, the problem in terms of German plans with the conquest of the Soviet Union, you've heard it probably called Operation Barbarossa, but whatever, okay, at this point in time in this class, was that the invasion had wound up getting postponed. Basically because Italy had created problems for Germany. Italy tried to play the great conqueror, the great power, and in the end blew it. Yeah, that was in Greece. And they had to get bailed out by the Germans, or, they were worried that the Italian people would throw Mussolini out and let the Allies in. And at this point, Italy bordered Germany. So really, Hitler had no choice but to bail out the Italians and stabilize the situation, and that took 6 weeks. I mean, what they were able to do in planning that out and taking enormous amounts of territory, all of Yugoslavia, the Germans, in order to be able to do this is astounding, but it still took 6 weeks. Now you might say, well, what difference does that really make? And the difference really isn't anything in and of itself important. What is important is that the weather was an enormous consideration. We thought that the winter weather would be an enormous consideration in the Ukraine war, the Russo-Ukrainian war, and it turned out not to be. I didn't hear of any tanks getting stuck in frozen snow or whatever, and it's, long over with now. We're almost May.
I mean, does it help that it's like both of these countries have always been in that kind of weather? So
Um,
they're adapted to it, or?
Yeah, if it's amazing, you can't really necessarily tell the difference between the Ukrainian troops and the Russian troops. They kind of dress similarly. There's so many similarities because they derive from the same source, okay? Except for what we've been able to teach the Ukrainians about modern warfare. So, right, I mean, both sides understand. And also, Ukraine is pretty far south. Okay, I mean, Crimea is, Mediterranean climate. So anyway, and Hitler and the Nazis, or the Germans, whatever, are gonna go for Moscow when they invade. Primarily Moscow, because that was the capital of the Soviet Union, and they figured if they could take the capital, then I don't know why they thought if they take the capital they'd win, but I don't know, that's what the Russians thought recently, because that's what they went for, the capital, Kiev, right? They also intended to take Kiev, and they intended to take Leningrad, which is they reverted back to the original name of St. Petersburg. Of the three, they only would take Kiev, actually. And so yeah, the problem's the weather. What is the weather like? Well, some of you've been to Europe. Most of you will wind up there sooner or later. The weather in Europe is the closest analogy, you're probably not familiar with it, would probably be the weather in Seattle. And then as you go further south, it would be like California. Okay, and as you go further west from Washington State, Oregon, California, not that far south, but as you would go further east, okay, from the state of Washington, northern part of the U.S., it gets, what is the temperature pattern as you move out from there to Montana?
More dry, but still cold.
In the winter, it is incredibly cold. Okay, we're talking below zero all day long cold. Nothing you guys have probably ever experienced. Okay, I interviewed before I came here at South Dakota State University, and they were telling me about their winter there, and they said in winter you've got to, I can't remember if it was breathe in with your nose and out with your mouth, or the other way around, in order not to die. Because it was so cold, it freeze your lungs. Maybe they told me that to get rid of me, but I don't know. It seems real.
Washington State is always damp, Professor.
Well,
That's why they call it the Ivy State.
South Dakota is pretty damn cold, but that is the winter. In the summer, it's really hot because I don't know why, but it's really hot. Not as humid as here. So it's unpleasant. Actually, you don't usually hear about that, right? It was really unpleasant for these guys actually to fight in the summer in Russia because it would get really hot. But it isn't going to kill you, right? What will kill you is the cold. And by the time Hitler actually does invade, which will be late June 1941, and that's actually still spring, okay, there. It's probably still a little bit coldish. They figured, had 4 months to get all the way to Moscow and knock it out, as well as Kiev, as well as Leningrad. 4 months before see what happens, and I'm not all that familiar with Washington State or whatever, it rains all the time. But so in terms of precipitation and snow and stuff, it'd be more like the Northeast. Okay, are any of you guys from the Northeast? No? Oh, sorry for you guys. Is that an anti-Texas thing? No. What the weather is like in the Northeast is that in the fall and the spring, it rains a lot, meaning like every day, but like kind of sprinklies, it's usually not real hard. Okay, it's not like here. Here it's infrequent, very strong rain showers, whatever, thunderstorms. Up there it's not. So the ground gets muddy, okay, because it's gonna be wet so all the time. And then, depending on how far north you are, as winter comes around, the ground will be and muddy, it makes humps and bumps, right? It is, for whatever reason, people or vehicles go down into the mud and so on. When it freezes, it's like concrete, okay, in that same position. And as long as it stays frozen, it is, I think, the hardness of concrete. So if you had like tanks coming across long fields of nothing but dirt, and you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of tanks, they're going to be making all sorts of grooves and stuff in the ground, which, if it had been dry and relatively warm, so what? But they're gonna just make that mud that then will freeze up like concrete their vehicles. So the Germans knew it. They said, we can't survive that situation. We've got to make sure we take the main cities in 4 months. Okay, that sounds real good, doesn't it? But I can say what I can say. I hope they give me a raise of $100,000 this week. Doesn't mean anything. That you have to, that doesn't guarantee anything. And essentially that was the problem with the Germans, is they started their invasion so late, and the Russians fought harder than they had expected for the reasons I mentioned. And, Russians aren't stupid people. They experienced blitzkrieg, they experienced advanced German tactics and so on, and they adopted them and taught themselves how to use it. Okay, and they had pretty decent weaponry. They bought the plans. Everybody knows they had the kind of the best tanks on average of the war. T-72s, right? They bought that from the U.S. The plans came from, I don't know if it was the Ford factory but that was U.S. plans they bought to make that tank. I don't know why we didn't make that tank. We made, I don't know why. So anyway, the Russians were able, and you really shouldn't call them Russians, because that, in the Soviet Union, they included Ukrainians, they included all these other people, Belarusians, but were lazy, and Russia has so taken on the historical persona of the Soviet Union in some ways, like World War II. People just keep calling it Russians. So anyway, the Russians are able to hold the Germans off long enough that the Germans are not going to be able to survive the weather, pretty much. Certainly not be able to keep moving forward. They almost take Moscow. They can see Moscow. Imagine that. You drive around in your car, right? You're on the highways around here. You are, I know on 45, when I'm 20 miles, I can be far away on the interstate, but at little points, I can see the skyscrapers here. And there's just 20-mile gap where that's the distance they were, and that's what they could see. So you get yourself a sense of how close they are, but they're not there, right? If you observe like I'm telling you, you'll realize that. And, it just got too severe for the Germans to keep forward. For one thing, they were having to, I don't know how the hell they dug underneath their tanks, but however they did it, dig a pit underneath the tank, build a fire, get the fire going to warm the tank enough to start. in a situation like that, you ain't gonna be doing good. Okay, I don't know why the tanks didn't explode. They must have had very little gas in it. I don't know, but at first, but that was what they were doing. It was sort of absurd. A lot of guys getting frostbite and dying or having to go to the hospital, so they get knocked out. Okay, and even if you're winning a war, you're still losing weapons and men as you're winning. The longer the war goes on, the more guys, presumably, that you've got are gonna die. I mean, you can start drafting older men or something, but, older men aren't as good at all of this as younger men. I mean, and then you're sucking up more and more of your labor force, and so on. Older men tend to be higher up in the hierarchy, right? And know more stuff and so on and so forth. So, the Germans will draft higher up and higher up. But the key thing here is that they will never be able to break through and knock out the Soviet army. They take Kiev, they take all of Ukraine, which is what they were really there for. And if Hitler had been, I think, smart, if he got Ukraine, geez, isn't that enough? Do a treaty with Stalin. I mean, Stalin had every reason to believe eventually they'd be defeated. Even after Stalingrad, there was no guarantee whatsoever, and Stalin may very well have traded off on it. I mean, you couldn't really trust the Germans thereafter, right? And so presumably there'd be war again, but still. But Hitler became so determined to wipe out the Soviet Union from the map of Europe. He always took things too freaking far, really. That, he set a goal that was not achievable. He respected Stalin, though. He thought the Western leadership were wimps. But he thought Stalin was pretty cool. Stalin was a real fighter, so on and so forth. And Hitler, when he was winning, said to one of his associates, Stalin's not bad as a leader, as, whatever, guy. And when I win, I'm going to give him a nice villa by the sea to live in. Isn't that nice? I don't think Stalin liked Hitler. I don't think they had like a love fest between them, but a friend of mine told me that Stalin liked Hitler, but I never actually read that. So in any event, you see what's happened is that the Soviet Union in the overall Germany in the overall big picture has invaded the largest country in the world by land area with almost unlimited resources. I mean, look at they're living off of selling gas today. Like what, 70 years later or whatever. So they must have had unlimited amounts of gas and really all the necessary supplies to build munitions, weapons and so on. Stalin was able to coerce people to work in for military factories or anything else he wanted, including getting cities of millions of people, getting hundreds of thousands of people to dig defenses around the cities against the Germans, which they did and which helped. Okay, have they been doing that in Ukraine? I guess, right? Have regular citizens volunteered to help dig trenches and tank tracks and stuff?
For Ukraine?
Yeah, in Ukraine today.
I don't know about trench digging, but I know that they're repairing railway lines and building Molotov cocktails and stuff.
Right, that's right. So yeah, In fact, I read in the paper today, they even voluntarily flooded a bunch of their own land, destroying their houses and stuff, like a hurricane, to hold off the Russians.
Point of Belgium in World War II.
You know, whoa, well, it's just like World War II. It is uncannily, it is spooky like World War II. That's what, in a way, it's got me spooked, I guess. So, you know, trying to summarize this in such a short period of time, Stalingrad, as you know, that'll be the farthest point at which the Germans get, which will be kind of like just past Ukraine.
Actually, honestly, the turning point for.
Oh, some people say that, but it's arguable. A lot of historians say when they blew it in front of Moscow, after that, the Soviets, they hadn't even hardly begun to draft guys that they could draft and train them to build the weaponry that they would need. Okay, but they had so many resources. Stalin got all the factories in front of the German invasion, okay, to take all their advanced machinery, which weighed tons and tons, get that stuff on trains, ship it 1,000 miles to the east, where Germany's never going to touch, and rebuild those factories. That was one of the most stunning accomplishments of that sort in history. And he could do it because of the power that guy had. You know, he doesn't take no for an answer. And it worked. Okay, could he take the buildings with him? No. Are factory buildings that important? No, they're not important at all. In 2017, Elon Musk and Tesla, so many people wanted the car, he couldn't produce it fast enough. What did he do?
Built in the factory.
In what? Inside of what? A tent. A tent. You don't need buildings. You need the machines and you need the people. And it worked perfectly. Well, I don't know perfectly, but it worked. So Germany is simply not going to have that level of resources, that level of manpower. Okay, that is why it's going to be forcing people it captures, people under occupation, including Jews eventually, to work in its factories to make weaponry and so on, because of the fact that they simply did not have enough people compared to the Soviet Union. And who was giving the Soviet Union lots of important weaponry and stuff? Ta-da! The United States. We gave them 500,000 trucks and tons of food and other stuff. Trucks so they could be mobile, because the Germans had trucks and they were mobile. Okay, and we knew that who was really most of the war fighting and dying to stop the Germans weren't Americans, they were Russians. And if we couldn't keep Russia in the war, and the Germans took all those resources and not having to fight in the East anymore, they might be unstoppable. Okay. When Pearl Harbor happened and the US got in the war, the official strategy was to devote 90% of our resources to fighting Germany, not Japan, until Germany was defeated. It didn't really happen, actually, because of public pressure and so on. But that was what was supposed to happen. Why did we want that to happen?
Communism to explain, right?
Well, no, we're keeping communism alive. Because we're keeping the Soviet Union alive, helping them out. Trying to defeat the Germans. why would we put Germany as our key target before we put the Japanese that way? And against the vast majority of Americans' wishes.
Germany was the bigger threat.
Yeah, Germany could take over the world. Japan could not.
There you go.
Okay, Japan did not have nearly the kind of power that Germany had. Okay, it's not that Japan wasn't, a threat and so on and so forth and et cetera, but it never would have been able to expand beyond East Asia. It couldn't even take China on its own. And that's why we did it. And when Pearl Harbor happened, okay, not long after, the invasion of the Soviet Union, Hitler did have an alliance with Japan, but it was a very weak alliance, okay? It really mattered pretty much zero. All right, it was nothing like our alliance with Britain, which, by the way, obviously survived because of us, right? Because of all the food and weaponry that we sent over there, and then, of course, us being the majority of the soldiers who win the war in the West. And Churchill knew stuff like that comes at a price. All right? That is the way it is. We can be huggy, kissy, brother, countries and all that garbage as much as we want, but things like that come at a price. And Churchill remarked to one of his associates, look, either we're going to become a satellite of the Soviet Union or the satellite of the U.S. Take your pick. And notice the Britain almost always follows American foreign policy, right? Almost always, just like they are right now.
There was a scene in The Crown about that.
Oh, really?
Which way they were going to. And then would America get in at the right time?
Well, they always prefer, I think, us, compared to the Germans. But what I'm saying is that if, in fact, we help them survive, countries don't do things in order to be nice because they like other countries and so on and so forth. That's absurd. Countries do things because they believe it's in their best interest. Okay, we aren't helping Ukraine out, people, because we like Ukrainians. Okay, we're not spending billions and billions of dollars that otherwise could go into, take your pick, because we like Ukrainians. We're doing it because we're worried Russia's so powerful and so kind of like, off the reservation, or however you want to put it, disobeying the rules, that they're a threat of world war. That's why we're doing it. Being Ukrainian, whatever. It doesn't really matter.
On the liberal world order.
It's nice that, I don't know, blah, 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 blah. I don't know, we could get into it. We could get into talking about the current immigration of Ukrainians to the U.S. That's really interesting from stuff I've read. I am certain we're going to be seeing some Ukrainians around here, right, at UHD sooner or later. Probably not while you're here, but they're coming as maybe teenagers. They're going to start showing up here. So that'll be interesting. And anyway, so Hitler was not required to declare war against the United States by any treaty that he had after Pearl Harbor. Okay, the Japanese didn't expect it. But Hitler, we could talk about why Hitler declared war against the U.S. and what his rationale was. But in the end, he did it out of just anger that the U.S. was aiding Britain more than anything else. And his assumption that it really didn't matter. that we'd never be able to take Europe. His generals knew better. It's like, what the hell are you doing? The two largest, most powerful countries in the world, besides us, are the United States and the Soviet Union. Well, I guess Japan too, but, you know. You are taking on two continental-sized countries when we are the size of Texas. That is a recipe for suicide. Okay, but Hitler believed Americans were lazy. All we cared about was our Amazon goodies that we got every week in the mail, that we ordered, right? But Amazon back then was what?
Kohl's. No, Sears.
Sears, yeah, very similar, actually. You know, they had a catalog, you know, pick your choice, send in your money, they ship you your thing. And you could buy any damn thing from Sears. So, that was a mistake. Okay, because we had a industrial potential that the world had never, not just seen, but dreamed of in actuality. We were very overall educated, populous country with virtually unlimited resources. Now, the difficult thing, though, was us trying to invade Europe. We can't defeat Germany unless we defeat Germany. Do you see what I'm saying? And to do that, we have to get ourselves to Europe. And you'd say, well, I don't know what time it is. You guys are looking at the clock, make me nervous. What time?
It's
12:30.
12:30.
Oh, okay. No, I wanted to get the scratches out of my glasses, and I thought like sanding them with sandpaper would help, but
What?
now I can't see out of them. So I'm hoping if I keep sanding it down, then the lens won't do anything though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's already getting wavy as hell,
You're
so.
changing the prescription.
This is, yeah, right, this is a fool's, whatever.
Fool's errand.
Yeah, fool's errand what I'm doing. So why was it so hard to invade Europe? Because look, it's gotta be a huge army with extremely bulky, heavy weaponry. Okay? That's gonna have to land all at once, or the Germans are gonna be able to take them out. There ain't gonna be no surprise about, you know, where you're landing the troops now, is there? Really? You know, well, they didn't know, they knew we were landing, but they didn't know if that was the big one, right? Or we were gonna try 2 simultaneous landings. So they still fought, right? Significantly. And so what you've got then also is it has to take some time to get these guys off. So if you know where the guys are coming off, and it's going to take them a while to get off the ship, it should be fairly easy to blow them to hell in terms of the guys who already landed. Okay, and continue to do it for the guys who keep trying to land. Hitler was confident that, regardless of what happens with the Soviet Union, he was not going to have to fight a 2-front war with, kind of minimal preparation on the Germans' part. Okay, why were we able to do it? Essentially, we were just able to overwhelm them. Okay, we did fool Hitler, as Connor is suggesting, making him keep back some of his panzer armies because he thought we'd land somewhere else as well. So that was a brilliant, espionage thing. We had 2 very important espionage things that helped us in that war. One was, Ultra, the cracking of the Enigma code, so we knew where German ships were, or subs. and the other was fooling Hitler about exactly where we'd be invading. So if you take my course on espionage, woo-wee, which, I don't know, think it's gonna go. I think that'll be the first one I do, actually. Then, because I have like professors asking if they can take it, or why I put on it that I have some work experience in that field. That was an interesting one as well. But anyway, so with that, yeah, we overwhelmed the Germans in our capabilities, our numbers, the weaponry we could bring on shore. They simply could not hold us off. Not for long. And once we broke out of the Normandy beaches, the Germans have themselves a real three-front war, actually, because they're fighting us in the west, us including the British. They're fighting us in the south, because we had, Italy had collapsed. So they had taken what they could of Italy. The Russians are fighting them to the east.
And that's not including North Africa either.
Well, the south, right. I mean, the south, they're fighting. So, you've got that situation, okay, which is utterly, really impossible for a country the size of Germany to survive. It was a question of how long they could keep themselves going.
No country could survive that.
No countries could survive that. And so also, by the way, it becomes increasingly obvious to everybody that by the end of this war, there's going to be two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. And everybody else is going to be kind of pinned down between one or the other pretty much. Because we are wiping out Germany and Japan. And that's not the atomic bomb. If we say, oh, well, how did we wipe out so much of Japan? I ask classes, I say, what's the first, when I go to class, I say, what's the first thing you think of when you think of Japan? I don't know, well, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to say, I don't know, anime and stuff like that, right? And then I say, what's the first thing you think of when you hear Germany? It's like, oh, the Holocaust, World War II. And it's like, okay, what's the difference? There really isn't a great difference between the two and what they actually did.
Good PR.
The Japanese purposefully killed millions of people. They just didn't do it in a industrialized way. They starved people to death, or I don't know. There was very little difference,
They did a lot.
honestly. But they get the better rap after the war. So anyway, how do we do it? Well, we perfect while we are within bombing range of Germany, what is known as terror bombing or firestorm. And the purpose of that is to use technology and knowledge of physics and chemistry and tactics and put that all together in order to build up a fire in the center of a city that is so incredibly hot that it will suck in all the air, all the oxygen within miles, and people die. And it's mass death. You don't need the atomic bomb. We didn't need the atomic bomb. We killed as many people in 5 days, 6, 7 days by mass firestorm as we did with the atomic bomb.
Yeah, we did more damage to Tokyo and killed more people
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Tokyo was the worst hit of all. I don't remember the numbers. I just remember the numbers for Germany.
Over 500,000.
Okay. The atomic bombs, you're talking about like 40,000, 70,000. And when we hit Dresden, about 40,000 died. When we hit Hamburg, 30 or 40,000 died. I mean, that's within range. Okay, and so that's what we did. We purposefully, utterly destroyed Germany by air. We thought the German people would rebel. They didn't. Why? The SS is around watching. You are just trying to think of how you can survive day to day. Okay, not planning mass rebellion. I mean, come on, right? You're required to work 12 hours a day. You are not getting enough to eat, so you're always hungry, and always hungry. The hell is being bombed out of you, so that you have to rush to bomb shelters, or you can't sleep at night, because that was one thing the Allies do. We keep bombing, partly just to keep people awake so they can't, the next day, be very efficient in their work. So we bomb just to keep them awake. And as a result, by the end of the war, as I tell people, Germany will look very much like some of the Roman ruined cities that exist today. Where all it is Roman ruins, no modern city. It will look like that. We obliterate Germany intentionally. And of course, the people we're killing in doing that are not soldiers. They're not hanging around the cities. They're women and children and old people. Okay, and foreign workers. So, nobody really draws the equivalency between American bomber pilots and the people that did the gas chambers in the Holocaust, but both groups killed innocent civilians by the hundreds of thousands in horrendous ways. What am I supposed to say? That's what happened. Mass murder is a thing human beings seem to love. Look at Ukraine right now. There's nothing human beings enjoy more than killing each other. What am I supposed to tell you? Right? When they got the chance to do it. So, so that's kind of like World War II in 75 minutes. Well, I guess it was 2 class periods, right? So we have 2 class periods left. So talk about the situation in Germany after the war and a little on the Cold War. By the time you get to Germany at the end of the war, we were not going to allow another Germany to exist. Okay, that was not going to happen, because we'd already fought 2 world wars with these people. So the first thing we do is just divide the country up into occupation zones.
East and West Germany?
Right? Well, they will become that. We, for various reasons, insist the French get a little piece, and it's mainly the Americans and British, and then on the east is the Soviet Union. Okay? And we recreate those zones into little images of ourselves. Okay? There is no country besides Canada that is more Americanized than Germany. Okay? Germany is the most Americanized country. That doesn't mean it's not different and fundamentally, I guess, in various ways. But nevertheless, you'll see that. Okay, for example, when they speak English, they speak with an American accent, not a British accent.
Is that where that Rammstein song comes from?
The what?
The
Rammstein?
I don't know, what is that?
It's a heavy metal band.
America.
Oh.
It's America.
Beats the hell out of me. We have to see what happens now in Germany, because they pledged to remilitarize, right? So more than double what, and I don't know if they're going to draft people again, but you know, they were up until a few years ago, so they probably bring back the draft. That'll be interesting to see what happens. So, right, anyway, we actually do, before too long, pressure the Germans to rebuild their army under us, because we need the bodies and we need the weaponry against the Russians now. So that is really weird. We have them start rebuilding their military, I think, 10 years after the end of World War II. You know, they said, well, you know, we went through this twice, it didn't work. You know, we got lots to do, actually. Why don't we just let you, United States, you know, deal with all of this, okay? And the U.S. said, nope, you are a very populous country. You are our allies, and we would like you to recreate your army in order to really actually kind of be like our army.
Yeah. I mean, we already have like 1,500 of your scientists working for us. Why can't you do the same?
Well, yeah, and you look at NATO. I mean, NATO's an extension of the United States. We dominate it. We call the shots, and we need their weaponry and guys to fight the war with us if we go to war. I mean, their stuff all together. Their stuff's about equal to ours, I think. The rest of NATO compared to the United States. So. NATO and the U.S. together, more or less, have more stuff than Russia and China together. Okay. And remember, just numbers of troops or numbers of machine guns doesn't decide the war. It's also training and leadership and logistical capabilities, and all of that is maybe even more important. Okay, so, you know. Anyway, I guess it's time to go by now, isn't it?
About 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 more minutes?
What's the difference?
You know, I can show you later a map of the partition of Germany, but as we know right now, Europe is going to be divided into two camps, right? The pro-American one and the pro-Soviet one. Not that the people liked the Soviet Union, but they were under their control. Not that we directly controlled Western Europe.
It was more of a sphere of influence.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we bribed them with money, okay? It's called the Marshall Plan. We were protecting them militarily with NATO. What choice did they have, really? If they wanted to stay a wealthy, free, developed country, they had no choice. They had to, you know, basically do what we said, which is, for one thing, never allow the communists to take over your government legally by voting. That never happened, and that had a lot to do with the CIA and American influence. Okay, because the communists can come off as cool, you know, and like, I don't know. There were reasons why people might vote communist, actually. So I've done this now for hours and hours and hours, actually, and
Thank you, just that.
I don't think it's getting better.